What is up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here, and this is a very special episode for Classic Albums Revisited, because today I'm going to be reviewing an album that had just celebrated its 50th anniversary on this date. The 10th of October 1969 was the day that one of the greatest debut albums of all time in history of popular music has been released. So I'm going to be talking about the legendary studio album by one of my top 10 favourite bands of all time, King Crimson, entitled In the Court of the Crimson King. So In the Court of the Crimson King, now being 50 years old, is completely outstanding, because this album has been hugely regarded as one of the greatest in progressive rock history, and King Crimson themselves are by no means least one of these significant and highly influential bands of all time. Besides, yes, King Crimson had been one of those prime examples of giving birth into the progressive rock genre, and with later bands that made it a huge phenomenon and big thing in music, bands like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Jethro Tull, Pink Floyd, etc. But King Crimson's reputation still holds up as a very important band. In the Court of the Crimson King has been talked about many, many times because of how important it is, and to really believe that the guys at this time were in their early 20s when they made this. It is insane, incredible to believe that musicians like these guys at a young age can come up with something this unique, intelligent and crafty in their own style of music. The lineup consists of Robert Fripp, Michael Giles, Greg Lake, Ian MacDonald and lyricist Peter Sinfield. It has 5 tracks. King Crimson produced the album themselves. The album cover art is simply iconic, one of my favourite album covers of all time. It was done by Barry Godber, but unfortunately in 1970 he had passed due to a heart attack he had suffered from, and Robert Fripp has now got the rights to the original painting of the cover art, and you should really discover more of this artwork in deeper detail, because it is very clever the way that the painting has been so presentable, and the album cover really sets the mood of what you would experience when you listen to this album. This album is highly consistent in different ways and structures, from frantic, brutal, crazy, to other sounds that are beautiful, gorgeous, soft, and many different stuff in between. The album opens with 21st Century Schizoid Man. From the first opening bars to the over-the-top noisy saxophones and the distorted vocals, this track alone is instantly one of the most complex arranged and highly tight written tracks King Crimson had ever done. And it is this insane to open this album on a track like this. It just hits you in the face, and there's just so much going on instantly, with a lot of wild musicianship, which is phenomenal on this track, but not only on this song, but to the later tracks as well. And 21st Century Schizoid Man is a very strong opening track. I Talk to the Wind, the second track, is my personal favourite on this whole album. It is definitely a song that takes things down after the insanity of the first track. It is very folk driven to luscious flute playing, and the vocal harmonies are just one of the softest and gorgeous sounding harmonies I've ever listened to. And I just love how it goes from the beginning to the end. It has a really natural and sweet flow. Speaking of some soft instrumentation, the third track, Epitaph, is, in my opinion, the most theatrical sounding piece, with a lot of cymbals and some soft drumming. And at the same time, Greg Lake, with his vocals, from being wild in 21st Century Schizoid Man to some of his best and greatest vocal passages in a song like Epitaph, it is outstanding. I love the sound of his tone, and his voice suits the melodramatic and down sound. The fourth track, Moonchild, at first is like a 2-minute actual composition. It is the longest track on here. It is more than 12 minutes long. But after the actual piece of the song ends, it just changes into something completely different, into like a heavy improvisation. You get to hear a lot of percussion to some fusion jazz style lead guitar playing from Robert Fripp, and it was just a piece that doesn't really go into like another big piece throughout this whole track entirely. And Robert Fripp is one of my favourite guitar players of all time. I love the sound of his guitar work on this album, but with later stuff from King Crimson as well. And he's not only one of my favourite guitarists, he's one of my favourites in sound, and I absolutely adore his guitar tone when he collaborated with Brian Eno on 2 collaborative efforts of No Pussyfooting and Evening Star, when Brian Eno went into his own solo career. But Robert Fripp, as a guitar player alone, definitely one of the most adventurous and unique ones at that. The last track, the title track, In the Court of the Crimson King, starts on a huge wall of sound of the chorus, then just switches into, again, that folky approach. And this track just goes into separate passages. It is pretty much like a combination of the loudness of 21st Century Schizoid Man to the softness on the acoustic and gentle style vibe on the later tracks. And I think it is one of the strongest epic closures in rock history. I do love 21st Century Schizoid Man being such a monstrous opening track, but I Talk to the Wind, as I said, is still my personal favourite on this whole album. The production was done by the band themselves, and this album was recorded in Wessex Sound Studios in London. To really recommend this album for anyone that wants to get into this kind of music, then I would agree. I highly recommend this to anyone that wants to get into either King Crimson themselves or progressive rock in general. And Peter Sinfield's lyrics on this record were really, really good. They were haunting in places and poetic on a lot of the passages, from the softer instrumentation that blends the lyrics with the kind of music that King Crimson had put together. It is a perfect combination, and it is definitely an album that it just never ever gets old. It's still one of my personal top 10 favourite debut albums of all time, and it'll stay that way in my own opinions. And Pete Townshend called this album an uncanny masterpiece, and that is absolutely true. There isn't really much needed to be said about this album other than it is a big journey to experience it for yourself, and it just draws you into what's going on, into the style that King Crimson had presented for the first time. If you want to get into King Crimson's later stuff, I would recommend others like Lark's Tones in Aspic to Red, Discipline. King Crimson had been releasing albums in different styles, from fusion to electronic, new wave, and, as I said, the folk, and some symphonic stuff. It's just a big band with a big catalogue of albums. There's just so much to grow into the listening ears of yours, to dive into the presentation of music the band had been doing for many years. So, that does it for my review for In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. Let me know what you think of this album down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.